Considering the circumstances, some of you may want to quote Professor River Song, an archaeologist from the TV series Doctor Who, when she said, "What in the name of sanity is that on your head?" Well, in reply, I would quote the good doctor by saying, "I wear a Stetson now. Stetsons are cool." And whilst not proclaiming for a moment I know the first thing about fashion, I do know that no self-respecting cowboy would be seen dead without one of these. Now, cowboys were quiet and really quite humble fellows who would sing songs of an evening, which served two main purposes. One was to pass the evening, but the second purpose was to quieten down the herds of cattle that they moved from the mountains of the west to the plains of the east. Unless, of course, one of them was an exceptionally bad singer. All very interesting, you're probably saying, but what precisely does this have to do with Clanson, Fried and Clanol? And indeed, that is a very valid point. Which brings me to my next point. No doubt you're all aware that Ceredigion has had its up and down over the years. No more so than the 1830s, when due to a combination of poor yields and ruthless landowners, the people of Ceredigion believed there's a new life for those in America. And you only have to see the posters in the Aberystwyth Coliseum advertising the ships to Quebec to prove this. What you may not know, however, is that thanks to the power of the internet and the US Census, it is possible to track the progress of the Welsh West. Now, we all know that the greatest concentration of Welsh communities are in Ohio and Pennsylvania. For example, there's a town in Pennsylvania called Cyniff Elfed, which I probably spelled horrendously wrong, which sounds to us like a Welsh village, but in Pennsylvania is a major town with the head of several regional banks. Well, there is a county in the north of Idaho state, which is between Washington and Montana, almost on the Canadian border, where 1/5 of the population can claim direct Welsh heritage. And what is the primary occupation of your average Idaho state person in the 19th century? Agriculture, and specifically ranching, hence the Stetson. So what did being a cowboy entail? Well, in simple terms, lots of horse riding and very little else. The average day for a cowboy was 18 hours riding his horse. In other words, from well before sunrise till after sunset in the winter, and from sunrise to sunset in the summer. So as you can imagine, saddle soreness was a serious medical complaint. As was unfortunately, and I noticed there are a lot of ladies in this room, I've always been told to be polite, but this is the medical term, and we are historians, flatulence. Caused by the diet of beans, and yes, you guessed it, more beans, which when combined with saddle soreness was not a pretty sight to see. And what did your average cowboy do for those 18 hours? Well, he was a boy, or at least a young man, who moved cows. He was a cowboy. You see, cowboys are nothing like the ones you see on television or in the films. They never held up any banks, were exceptionally poorly paid, and were just a little on the short side. Indeed, you can forget everything you've seen about cowboys being, if you'll pardon the expression, hunks. Like, for example, the John Waynes and the Robert Mitchums of this world. And there was one very simple reason for this. The horses would complain. And all that nonsense about cowboys walking into saloons, starting fights with the scrupulous landowners, don't make me laugh. They didn't have to, because just like today, they had unions fighting for their rights. And of course, just like any other select community, they had their own customs. For example, if you met a cowboy on the range and you say, "Well, hello there, John, how are you doing? What's the weather like?" Oh, no, you say, "Well, howdy, partner," and then have a conversation on the price of cattle at the market. And there were also customs as well to do with the actual cowboys themselves. You could never touch their hat or pinch their horse. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, what would happen if I was asked to take part in a posse, and you just happened to jump on a horse in order to go and follow in? Simple. I'd shoot you. No questions asked. Yes, life in the mighty West was mighty tough. The only bit of the whole thing Hollywood got right. If there's one reason why cowboys in the West are still holding such esteem to this day, it's this. Between the 1860s and the 1870s, they were the primary reason for the expansion of the West. And yet in the 1870s, they started to fade into history as the railroad and the road network spread from the east to connect to the west, meaning that cattle could be transported at much less expense. So I suppose it is for this reason I feel a sort of kindred spirit with the humble cowboy of the West, and hope that this has been an introduction of the interest of the Wild West, as it was called, and the small but important part that the Welsh played in it. Thank you very much.